We welcome Tim Lane back to part two, Tim. Sorry, we just cut off your explanation about the waffle player who tested positive, the A sample, for a stimulant in the WA FL Grand Final for Swan Districts, and the implications for a team. And we know that Marion Jones in Sydney, as you said, tested positive for drugs, yet her relay teammates were allowed on appeal to win back their gold medal. There are lessons perhaps here for the AFL and what it means in a team context, aren't there?
Yes. Now, my understanding is that her relay teammates had their golds reinstated simply because a court of arbitration ruled that the IAAF, the International Athletic Federation, didn't have in place a suitable code to deal with this, a code that actually deemed that they were in breach in such a way as that they should lose their gold medal. So it was a legal technicality more than a fairness outcome. And I would think in a four-person team, if you're applying a fairness test, if there is one demonstrable cheat, well, the gold medal should be stripped. You shouldn't be able to win or indeed win a medal.
Yep.
What do you do with a 22-person team? That's where it gets really tricky.
Especially if he's a peripheral player and starts on the bench and has no meaningful contribution.
Yes, but at the other end of the spectrum, he might not be. He might have been the best player on the ground. He might have been the match winner. He might have kicked 10 goals and got his team over the line by 1 point. So how do you deal with it? And I think you've actually got to deal with it at the worst case scenario point, that if it was such a player, the best on the ground, the match winner, that they wouldn't have won without him. You can't make a judgment about each individual case because it's just too subjective. So I think football would have to look very seriously at disqualifying a team. I'd be very surprised if it happened in this case, but I don't think differentiation should be made between whether it's a Sudafed type stimulant or whether it's serious human growth hormone or steroids. I mean, the women's 100-metre champion, Osayomi from Nigeria, was disqualified for using a stimulant. Individual event, admittedly, but they're treated just as seriously by the WADA code. So I think football really has some hard thinking to do about this. It's not easy. It's not an easy issue to deal with. But perhaps the threat of costing your team a premiership might be the greatest possible disincentive for players. Adrian Anderson, incidentally, has said that if a team was found to have been systematic in its use of performance-enhancing drugs, and I suppose he's talking about 3 or 4 or maybe more players being distributed performance-enhancing substances, that the AFL would be prepared to strip a premiership away. But would it with one player? It's a tough question, and we've got an acid test, so to speak, staring us in the face.
But really guidelines should be drawn up, because we can probably safely assume that one day this situation may well arise in a very important final.
Absolutely, and in a sense it has arisen here in a state competition. But it's a grand final, and there's a lot at stake, and there's a lot of thinking to be done about it.
Yep. Still on footy, Tim, International Rules Series in Ireland, which always provokes debate about its merits. As a concept, I must say it leaves me pretty cold. I wasn't one who watched the first test, which Australia won, and I don't think I'll be tuning into the second test, but that's just my prejudices at play. What do you think? Are you a devotee?
I'm pretty much on the same page as you. The BackPageLead page, Charlie. I can't get too excited about it, but then again, we can't begrudge those who do. It's the hybrid game idea. It's neither one thing nor the other. And I find that a bit hard to come at, because what is it really a test of? It's probably a test more of at which point the players of which code the hybrid rules actually favour a little bit more. You've got professionals playing against amateurs, one with bigger, harder, better trained bodies than the others. And you've only got the players of two countries meeting sort of on this perennial or biennial basis, depending upon how much hiatus there is between this contest and the next one. So I do find it hard, and it's been going on for decades, and you can't knock the determination and the valiant nature of the effort. But where does it all lead? I'm not really sure about that. Just as I'm not sure that the Chinese are suddenly going to sort of come to our game in their millions. But then again, you can't knock people for trying.
And Greater Western Sydney.
Well, we've got to get them first. We've got to get Greater Western Melbourne too, because that's a growing area. And if we can't get them, I don't reckon we've got too much hope of getting Greater Western Sydney.
We will see Greater Western Sydney in the NAB Cup next year, and I think the AFL have got their fingers crossed that Israel Folau, in fact, will come up against Carmichael Hunt in one of the first games. Have you got any thoughts? I mean, you have written a column about this on BackPageLead, and I think you felt that there was a major sort of sense of AFL triumphalism at play in recruiting such big names from a rival code. Will you be tuned into that match, Tim, in February?
Well, you can't help but be a bit interested in how these fellows go in trying to make the transition, and whatever else one might think about the AFL's ambition and the way in which it seeks to put it into effect. It is interesting for those of us who follow the game, and I guess at some point in your heart you've got to actually hope it works, because we want our game to work. On the other hand, Jeff Kennett has come out and bemoaned the fact that Tassie won't be hosting any NAB Cup footy, and I think it's a fair point too, that the state that has given heart and soul.
Are you with Jeff on this one?
I'm with Jeff on this one, although we see it from very different angles.
Exactly.
He would just like to see Hawthorn playing closer to home, and and try to eke out another 1,000 members to the Hawthorn cause from Tasmania. I mean, they've done pretty well. They've got about 10,000. Makes you wonder how many thousand they would have if they actually had their own team to support, not a team from the eastern suburbs of Melbourne.
Well, I'll stop you there, Tim, because we could be here for the rest of the evening. But just finally, I know you're a keen student of the form.
Sun's still up, Charlie. I'm not going to go on that long, unless you really let me loose.
A keen student of the form. Now, I know you've had your head buried in the form guide ahead of Saturday's derby and the cup meeting. Is the rain going to have a big effect on your particular tips chances?
Oh, I've still got to go through and look for the W's in brackets next to their names, Charlie, but I will say this to my untrained eye, So You Think was doing it a bit hard at the end of the Cox Plate, and I don't know, as someone who studies it all rather superficially at this time of year, that didn't look like a Melbourne Cup winning run to me.
Yeah, very sagacious as usual. Tim Lane, thank you so much for joining us on BackPageLead, and we look forward to your contributions in the coming weeks.
Thanks, Charlie.